This is the last video I will ever make on Joker 2 because it's really not worth talking about it anymore. But I thought that I would get into the behind the scenes story of how a film this bad, this resentful towards its audience got made in the first place, because it really resents anybody who watched this film, anyone who wasted their time with it, and it seems even the studio that allowed it to get made. But it's always interesting to find out the insanity that went on behind the scenes to get some of these movies made. And sometimes it doesn't always get revealed to us. But this time I think that all of Hollywood is in a panic over it because of how much money it's going to lose. So they're digging around and they're kind of allowing news outlets to get the full story of what went on behind the scenes and why everything became the way it did. And it's very interesting. So if you wanted to know, if you happen to see Joker Folie, Deux or Deux or whatever it's called, I don't care, and you're wondering what happened behind the scenes and how they could possibly allow this thing to get out into the public, here's the story. The idea came to Joaquin Phoenix in a dream. Yes, that's always the way fever dream movies start. Now, not all creators who've had ideas come to them in dreams end up failing. For example, the idea for Terminator came to James Cameron after a nightmare he had. That was the idea for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Not all things that came to people in dreams or inspired by dreams end up turning out bad, but it's just funny to see a movie this bad and somebody says that, and to feel like it was an acid trip in a bad way, and then see that it was actually a dream Joaquin Phoenix had. And Joaquin Phoenix is a weird dude, and he has a lot of issues, and lately he's been making some very odd choices with the films he's chosen, like Beau is Afraid or Napoleon, so it kind of makes sense that a film this bad and this sort of, how do I even describe it? It's like, how did this even get made? How did the musical elements come to fruition? I guess Joaquin Phoenix had a dream where he was dressed up as Arthur Fleck and dancing and singing, and that's how this movie got made off the first thing. Now, originally Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix did not want to do a sequel. They absolutely did not want to do a sequel to the film, which also explains why there's no story to it, really. And they contemplated putting this dream from Joaquin Phoenix on a Broadway show before they decided, well, we'll make it into a movie. So this was supposed to be maybe a Broadway show. Can you imagine? Like, the Broadway crowd would have never watched something related to the Joker, but this all just sounds like a couple of guys on acid trying to make this movie. And now the thing that is going on with this film is that Todd Phillips got this thing greenlit just because his first film made $1 billion. And that's what I was getting from a lot of these articles, is that they can't blame anyone in Hollywood because, as they say, no one would have said no to a sequel to $1 billion film, especially not in today's current sequelized, remake-alized Hollywood landscape. So the executives at Warner Brothers had to say yes to Todd Phillips after he originally wasn't going to do a movie, because here he is with a sequel to $1 billion film. So they just had to say yes to it. There was no way they were going to say no, no matter what he did with it. And I think that's interesting because this movie has been described as a troll job by many. And I'm wondering if Todd Phillips went forward with the mindset that, whatever I say a Joker sequel will be, they'll let me do it and pay me millions to do it. And that is how this film got made. It's just kind of an interesting critique on the culture in Hollywood that it literally doesn't matter what Joker 2 was. It just had to be a sequel to the first Joker, and that's how it got made, essentially. Now, this is the most interesting part of this and why it explains everything about the film that went wrong. Todd Phillips had full creative control of the film. In the first place, he even had DC executives that he had to take notes from, like Walter Hamada was involved in the first film, which might explain, even as the first movie was not really a Joker film, why it had shades of the Joker in some areas and shades of DC, whereas the sequel, I would say, had no shades whatsoever. He had to take his cues from the executives at Warner Brothers and people from DC, like Walter Hamada. Now, this film, interestingly enough, Todd Phillips would not listen to anyone, I'm hearing. Not the Warner Brothers executives, not James Gunn, who gave notes on it, not anyone. He had free creative reign on this. And apparently, he said, I don't want this to have anything to do with DC whatsoever. And I think that's funny, because it's like you've co-opted a DC property in order to get these films made in the first place. And you say now you don't want anything to do with DC. Nice, nice one, but we'll get to that in a second. Apparently, once again, James Gunn gave notes for the films, and I'm like, were the notes don't release this? But Todd Phillips ignored that because he only wanted to do whatever it was that he wanted to do, and apparently they let him do that because the first film made $1 billion, and for whatever reason, that's how it works in Hollywood. Usually when you see films come out and they're really good, it's a collaborative effort. You have the right creators, the right producers, the right editors, all the right people working on it. But this is usually why directors tend to fall after having a big success. Like, that's what happened to George Lucas, that's what happened to Peter Jackson, is because they get all the praise for creating a good film, and then they let them do whatever they want. And without the other people working with them, they just tend to make some pretty awful stuff. But that is the big thing, is that Todd Phillips got say on everything in the film. The final cut of the film, not doing test screenings, that's a big thing. When I was watching the film, what I was thinking is, how did this possibly get through test screenings without people complaining about it? There's no way this would have gotten through. They didn't do test screenings because Todd Phillips didn't want that. That's very interesting. I don't think that he wanted it to get out what the film was. I don't think he wanted anything that he was doing in it to change. And the other thing is that the studio did not want it to premiere at Venice, probably because they saw how bad it was and didn't want it to be shown. But Todd Phillips insisted that it premiere at Venice, like the first one did. And I think that from that motive, he probably was totally convinced of himself and that this was going to win critics over because it went against the fans of the original film. And that's why he did that. But it ended up backfiring because it ended up warning people of the film and made it so that he did not win over the critics like he thought he would. Now, the film had a huge budget, $200 million, a $20 million salary for Joaquin Phoenix, and $12 million for Lady Gaga. And apparently, Todd Phillips also got $20 million from this. And that's funny to me because it's like he was taking the money and running. And there is no reason why this movie had to be $200 million. Most of the budget, like the biggest chunk of it, went to those paydays. Like, it seems like he was trying to get a big payday for himself, because a movie that is mostly set in two locations with some stage-produced musical numbers does not need a budget that big. And the musical aspect was downplayed in the marketing, with Todd Phillips insisting it wasn't one. But I don't understand why they made it a musical, because it was a part of Joaquin Phoenix's dream. It doesn't make any sense. Now, to get on to the next part, apparently what happened is, in the first film, Todd Phillips wanted it to end with the Joker carving out a Glasgow smile like Heath Ledger's Joker in order to tie it to Heath Ledger's Joker. Now, I've said before that the first one really relied on doing basically an off-color version of Heath Ledger's Joker, and that was what the intention was, and that's what probably drew people in. Because you have to understand, for a person like Todd Phillips who cares nothing for DC, to him, the Joker is Heath Ledger's Joker, because if you don't care about DC at all, that is the most iconic, recognizable version that has appeared in a film. And he was trying to tie his version into that. And I've said this before, and no one believed me. But Christopher Nolan, good boy, popped in and said, you can't do that. And so it wasn't done. But Christopher Nolan isn't at Warner Brothers anymore, and so Todd Phillips decided to do that for his sequel. So the moral of the story with everything is that everything of this film is Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix. They had no one to tell them no. They wouldn't listen to anyone. They were allowed to do whatever they wanted for the film, and this is the result. This is what they wanted to make, and this is what they look like without all the executive notes and producing and all that stuff that made the first one what it was. So jury's out on Todd Phillips being a great filmmaker by himself. So the last piece of information, other than this film actually opened worse than Morbius. It was originally reported it was just as bad as Morbius. It was apparently worse than Morbius, is that Todd Phillips spent the entire premiere hanging out on his own private ranch. I wonder if he bought that ranch with the $20 million paycheck he got. But yeah, I'd be hiding out on a ranch too for this project, because it is so incredibly awful. But here's the thing with it. People say don't make fun of movies for bombing at the box office because things are really struggling right now. They are struggling. And Todd Phillips had no right to mess around on this film. He essentially co-opted a franchise, DC, the Joker, and in order to get his stupid little indie film scene. I'm sorry, I'm very bitter about this. And then he got mad he wanted Joker fans to see it to make it money, and now he's getting mad that Joker fans saw it, and that's the purpose of this film. And Like, the unmitigated gall of that, the narcissism and hypocrisy is something that I haven't even seen from Hollywood, and that is saying something. Like, how are you that selfish? Like, the people who worked on this film, the people who have a lot to lose from it failing, the theaters, like, we were having finally the slope up. We were having multiple films be successful for studios, and things were starting to go back to normal. And Todd Phillips, in this incredibly privileged position where he is able to get a film made and do whatever he wants with it, just trolls with it and fools around and makes this acid fever dream that is gonna just set everything back. It's gonna damage theaters. It's gonna damage all this stuff, and it's damaging the DC brand, because as much as Todd Phillips says that he does not want this to be involved with DC, it still is attached to DC. And the last 10 DC films that have been released, all of them except the Batman have bombed. And every DC film that is released has kind of just fed into people's bias that any DC film that releases is going to be bad or not worth their time. And this film continues to feed into that. It's at a point where I don't think, even if Superman is a good movie, that it's going to be successful at the box office, even with fantastic word of mouth. Look at what happened to Transformers 1, which I'm going to talk about in the next video. A great film, but because there was so much brand damage to Transformers, it's very hard now that you're getting good Transformers films made to get people to even care about it, because the brand has been so damaged and you haven't built up a new generation who likes these properties. And that's where DC is at. So what a selfish move from Todd Phillips against his entire industry. And I don't think the guy deserves to ever work again. Who would work with him again after this? After he did an entire movie just to be a middle finger to people? And who would ever work with Joaquin Phoenix again after he's walking off of projects and doing things off of his fever dreams? But I guess it's time to just let this film die. I'm very sorry I ever defended the film again. Don't care about DC anymore. I'll cover things because they're news, but don't care about this franchise anymore. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, patrons, as always, for supporting this channel. If you want to support the channel, check out the link in the description. See you guys next time.